2 security guards walked me out of my own brother's wedding rehearsal dinner. Not because I caused a scene, because I asked one question: whose name is on the venue contract? My name. Mason's fiancé's family didn't know that yet. My mother made sure of it. I'm Kayla Breyers, 38. I fly cargo planes for a living, the kind of job where a wrong number in a fuel calculation kills people, so you learn to notice small numbers that don't add up. Turns out I'd been ignoring the biggest wrong number in my life for 11 years, the one in my mother's checking account, the one that had my money in it and someone else's name on the label. I'll tell you exactly how I found out, and exactly what happened 40 minutes before my brother said, I do. But you need 3 secrets first, because my mother built her whole life on people never asking about the middle one. Secret 1 starts on a Tuesday nobody warned me about. I was 25, 6 months into my first captain's seat, flying red-eyes out of Denver, when my father's construction company folded, and he did something men like him don't survive doing quietly. He signed for a business loan against our house without telling anyone, gambling that one more contract would save the company. It didn't. He had a heart attack in a Home Depot parking lot 2 weeks after the bank sent the first notice, 53 years old. My mother, Diane, found out about the loan and the funeral in the same week. I flew home. My little brother Mason was 19, 3 semesters into college, the kind of kid who cries at commercials and means it. My mother met me at the airport with dry eyes and a legal pad, already listing debts, already triaging. That night, after Mason went to sleep, she sat me down at the kitchen table with the pad between us, like a patient chart. There's $41,000 against this house, she said. If the bank finds out your father hid it, they can call the whole loan due. I need 6 months to refinance quietly, before anyone official comes looking. Mason cannot know any of this. Not the loan, not the funeral costs, not any of it. I asked why not. Because your brother thinks his father was a good man who made one bad business call, she said. I am not going to hand him a father who lied to his own family for 2 years instead. He gets to keep the version he has. You and I carry the real one. I said okay. I was 25 and freshly grieving, and it sounded like protecting someone I loved. I didn't understand yet that I'd just agreed to become a ghost in my own family's story, the invisible battery keeping everyone else's lights on. Here's the first thing you should notice, because it matters later. My mother didn't ask me to lie. She asked me to disappear. There's a difference, and it's the difference that let her sleep at night for the next decade. For 4 years I wired money home every month, the mortgage, then Mason's tuition gap after his scholarship shrank, then a truck when his broke down 2 states from campus. Every dollar routed through my mother's account, because, she said, if Mason ever saw a transfer from me, he'd feel like the family's failure, charity from his big brother. She was protecting his dignity. That's the phrase she used, protecting his dignity. I flew 13-hour rotations and slept in crew hotels with blackout curtains taped to the windows, and every time I called home, Mason talked about scholarships and part-time jobs and how Mum had somehow kept everything together. I let him believe it. I told myself the story didn't matter as long as the roof stayed on. Here's what nobody tells you about disappearing on purpose. You don't get to choose how long it lasts, or what gets built in the space where you used to stand. Secret 2. The year I almost told him anyway, and what it cost me to stay quiet. Mason was 22. About to graduate, panicking about a leftover balance the financial aid office wanted before they'd release his diploma. He called me at 2 a.m., my time, half a world away on a layover in Anchorage, and I was tired enough that the truth almost slipped out whole. Listen, I said, about how tuition's actually been getting paid the last 4 years. Mum's here, he said, suddenly bright. Say hi, Mum's here. The line went warm and cheerful, and dead in the way conversations do when someone's decided the subject is closed. My mother called me back alone 2 hours later. Her voice had a texture I'd start to recognize, soft on the outside, wire underneath. What exactly were you about to tell him? That he should know where his tuition actually comes from, I said. He's 22, Mum. He's an adult. There was a pause, and then she played the only card that ever worked on me. If you tell him now, he won't hear gratitude. He'll hear that his whole college experience was a debt he owes you. Is that the brother you want to be? The one who hands him an invoice at graduation? I backed down. Not because I agreed, because I didn't have proof. Everything moved through her name. Every receipt, every account, every conversation with the bank. If I pushed, it would look like I was inventing a story to make myself the hero. She held the paper trail. I held nothing but a bank app on my phone that only I ever looked at. That's the moment I actually lost something, though I wouldn't understand what for another 6 years. Not money, leverage, the ability to ever correct the record without sounding bitter. Mason graduated. I flew home on 40 hours of no real sleep and sat in the back row of an arena in Ohio, while my mother sat front and center in a seat reserved for family, surrounded by cousins, glowing like a woman who'd built something with her own 2 hands. Which, in a sense, she had. She'd built a story, out of my money. I got one photo with Mason that day. He was already looking past me at people who'd shown up to more birthdays. That's secret too. Now the third one, the one that actually detonates. 18 months ago, Mason called me, genuinely excited for the first time in years, to tell me he was engaged. Her name was Priya, an architect, sharp and warm in the way people are when they've never had to fight for oxygen in their own family. I liked her immediately over video call. I told Mason he'd done well. He said, half joking, Dad would have grilled her for an hour, and then hugged her. Something in that sentence cracked me open a little. I offered to help with the wedding. Anything, money, logistics, whatever they needed. My mother answered, before Mason could. We've got it handled, sweetheart. You worry about your flights. I let it go. Mistake number 1, or maybe mistake number 400. I'd lost count by then. 3 weeks later, my mother called using the voice from the kitchen table. Soft outside, wire inside. There's one more thing, she said. Then we're square, I promise. The venue Priya wanted, a restored orchard hall outside Sacramento, needed an $11,000 deposit within 48 hours, or they'd lose the date to another couple. The business insurance settlement from your father's accident is finally exhausted, she said, which was a lie built on top of another lie, since there had never been an insurance settlement, only me. I can't cover this, and Mason cannot know that. Let him have one thing in his life that isn't a rescue. Here's the twist fate slipped into the paperwork, though. A transfer that size wouldn't clear in 48 hours, and the venue required whoever was paying to sign in person. My mother, architect of 11 years of invisibility, needed me visible for exactly 1 afternoon. I drove to the orchard hall myself. The coordinator, a woman named Ruth, slid a contract across a reclaimed wood table. You're the brother paying for this, she said, smiling. Priya's lucky. I signed everywhere the flags pointed. Client of record, Caleb Reyes. Card on file, day of contact, Diane Reyes, listed at my mother's request, so nobody bothers you at the airport, Ruth explained. I initialed a guest list amendment clause I never actually read. For the first time in 11 years, my own name sat on a document that mattered. My mother believed she'd buried it under her own. She had actually just wired her whole story for demolition, and neither of us knew it yet. If you've ever paid for something with your name kept off it, a house, a degree, a whole family's stability, you already know exactly where this is going. Tell me in the comments, did you stay quiet, or did you say something? I read every one. The next 14 months ran on 2 separate tracks, and I only had a ticket to one of them. Track 1, the money. Deposits, cake tastings, florist deposits, a final balance of $9,200 that cleared under card ending 7734, exactly 16 days before the wedding. Every transaction, time-stamped, filed, sitting quietly in a folder in Ruth's office, with my name at the top. Track 2, the wedding itself, which happened to other people. I wasn't invited to a single fitting. The groomsmen photos went up on social media, 5 guys in matching flannel, holding cans of local beer, and I wasn't in the frame or the group chat that arranged it. When I asked Mason about it, he sounded genuinely confused. Mum said you told her weddings weren't really your thing anymore, that flyings kept you kind of checked out. I hadn't said that. I'd never said anything close to that. But it was exactly cold enough, exactly plausible enough, that arguing it would have made me sound paranoid rather than erased. Then, 6 weeks before the date, an envelope arrived at my apartment. Heavy cardstock, my name in Priya's architect handwriting, one line inside underneath the printed invitation. I sent this one myself. Please come. I read that line more times than I'll admit to a camera. My mother's 12-year machine had a crack in it, and it was arriving in my brother's fiancé's handwriting. I called Mason that night. We talked for almost an hour, longer than we had in years. Somewhere past the 30-minute mark, his voice changed the way turbulence changes a cabin before you feel it. "Can I ask you something weird?" he said. "Did you actually tell Mum you didn't want to come to stuff?" The whole decade rose up in my chest at once. I chose my next words like I was walking a wing in high wind. There is no version of my life where I'd miss your wedding. Silence, but a working silence. I could hear him holding two stories up against each other and noticing, for the first time, that they didn't match. Then a doorbell rang on his end. "That's Mum, dress stuff," he said, and the moment folded shut. But right before he hung up, "I'm glad you're coming, Cal." I sat there in the dark, with the phone still warm in my hand, feeling something dangerous and specific: hope. My brother had stopped swallowing the story whole. He was starting to chew on it. That question scared my mother more than any bill ever could. An audit of money, you can survive. An audit of the story is the end of everything, and she has always been able to smell one coming. The night before the wedding, 2 things happened at almost the same hour, and neither of them was an accident, exactly, though only one of them was planned. First, the rehearsal dinner, groomsmen and immediate family only, which somehow never included me despite the fact that I was, on paper, the man who'd paid for the room they were standing in. Priya's father, a retired contractor named Arthur Cole, stood up mid-dinner with a glass of wine to toast the couple, and near the end he said something that made my mother's smile go stiff, according to Priya later. "And to the brother we haven't met yet," Arthur said. "Mason tells me he basically kept this family standing after his father passed. Tomorrow I'm shaking that man's hand first." Mason had been talking, quiet things, half-guessed things, over the last few months. My mother clapped along with everyone else, Priya said, but it looked like clapping through glass. Second thing, 3 days earlier, the venue's standard pre-event packet had gone out, addressed per contract to the client of record with a copy to the day of contact. My mother opened hers, glanced at what she assumed was routine paperwork, and saw the header, Client of Record, Caleb Reyes. Our coordinator will greet Mr. Reyes personally at check-in for final signature adjustments. Put yourself in her arithmetic for a second, because it's almost sad how simple it was. Tomorrow, at the gate, in front of Priya's family and every cousin who still believed Diane Reyes had held this family together alone, a coordinator with a clipboard was about to greet the invisible son by name, as the man who'd paid for every folding chair in that orchard. The story could survive my absence, it could not survive my arrival. By sunrise, my name was off the guest list. I didn't know any of that yet. I spent that morning ironing a navy suit I'd bought for exactly this day, wrapping a gift I'd been sitting on for 6 weeks, our father's old drafting compass, the one he used to sketch job sites on our kitchen table when I was a kid, restored and boxed with a card that said he'd have wanted to see the blueprints for this one. I got to the orchard an hour early. The line at the welcome table moved fast until it didn't. The coordinator, Ruth, looked down at her list, then up at me, then at the folder tucked under her arm, and her professional smile just stopped working. "I'm so sorry," she said. "You were removed from the list this morning." Behind me, the line went quiet, the way a room does when something breaks. My mother appeared at my elbow in dusty rows, moving like a woman arriving at her own coronation. "Mum, what is this?" She smiled the smile she saves for church, loud enough for the row behind us to hear. Why would we put someone on the list who's barely been part of this family? There it was, 11 years of architecture, said out loud, in public, on purpose. I nodded once. "Then today's the last time you get to call me family." I set the wrapped compass on the gift table with the others, walked back across the gravel, and didn't look back. I made it to my rental car before my hands started shaking, and I pulled over 2 miles down the road, because the lane markers had started swimming. I did the thing I always do with pain. I ran the checklist. Cabin pressure, fuel, altitude, fine. Everything else, not fine. Schedule it for later. Then I called my scheduling desk and asked if they needed a body for a cargo run that night. Cheerful as a boarding announcement. Hung up, sat on the shoulder of a California road in a navy suit, understanding myself with terrible clarity. For 11 years, every time my family made me feel like nothing, I ran towards somewhere I could be useful, because useful was the only shape of love I'd ever learned to build for myself. And here's the thing I want you to sit with. Sitting on that shoulder, holding what was left of the word family, I never once thought about the money. The final balance had cleared 2 weeks ago. Priya would have her orchard whether or not I was allowed to stand in it. Love doesn't stop being love just because someone strikes your name off a list. Back at the orchard, Ruth was opening that folder, and everything my mother had spent 11 years burying started clawing its way to the surface. Here's how I've pieced it together since. Cross-checked against Ruth, Arthur, and Mason himself. My mother had caught Ruth that morning between chair deliveries. Family emergency. Caleb isn't coming. Take him off the list. Keep the head count clean. Ruth struck the name. Day of contacts adjust lists constantly. It's routine. And thought nothing more of it, until the removed name walked up to her table in person and matched the name on the contract in her folder. She pulled the paperwork. Right there in the amendments clause, initialed by me 13 months earlier. Changes affecting the client of record require the client's written authorization. There was no written anything. There was a verbal instruction from a day of contact to erase the paying client from his own event, followed by a scene at the gate the client had absorbed in front of 100 guests and simply walked away from. In the events business, that's not an awkward morning. That's a liability with a string quartet attached. Ruth called her office. The office started calling my mother to fix the paperwork before the ceremony started. My mother's phone lit up mid-photo op with an unknown local number. She declined it, smiling. It lit again. She declined it again. The third decline is the one that changed everything, because by then Ruth had stopped waiting on the phone and gone looking on foot, and ran straight into Arthur Cole crossing the courtyard with the folder and a face that didn't belong at a wedding. Something wrong with the venue? He asked. Ruth, to her credit, told him the truth instead of a bland placeholder. There's a contract issue. The man your daughter's family turned away this morning is the client of record on this entire event. Arthur did the math out loud. He paid for this. Legally, you can't pull him off his own contract on a verbal instruction, and someone did. What's his name? He asked. Ruth turned the folder around. Caleb Reyes. A voice behind them said, Caleb. It was Mason's best man. No, wait. It was a voice I'd heard once before, on a stretcher, 4 years earlier, calling me by my first name because that's all a flight suit shows. I need to back up 11 seconds, because this is the part that makes the whole machine collide with itself. 4 years ago, on a private charter run out of a regional airport, I diverted a small aircraft with engine trouble to a closer strip and helped pull an unconscious 60-year-old passenger out through the cargo door before the fuel line caught. I never learned his name. Crews don't always get follow-up, and I was 3 states away by the time he woke up in a hospital bed. His family sent a thank you letter to the airline, addressed to the pilot who stayed. Policy meant it never reached me personally. That man was Arthur Cole. He was standing in that courtyard, holding a folder with my name on it, 4 years after telling his son-in-law-to-be's family, half joking, half serious, find that pilot someday, I owe him. He'd met Mason's brother, described only as distant, kept his flying life separate, barely part of the family, and never once connected that cautionary tale to the man who'd pulled him out of a burning cargo hold. You don't go looking for the person who saved your life inside somebody else's story about abandonment. Now he stood in a courtyard holding 3 facts that would not sit still together. Caleb, the pilot. The man turned away at the gate. The man who, the paperwork said so, plainly, had quietly paid for the ground everyone was standing on. Here's the scene my mother had built her entire life to sit in, and here's what it turned into. 110 guests on white folding chairs beneath the orchard trees, string duo playing the prelude. My mother front row, mother of the groom, hands folded, arriving at the moment she'd spent a decade rehearsing for, and then the processional simply didn't start. The duo looped the prelude once, then again. 100 heads can feel a delay in their spines before anyone says a word out loud. Inside a small clutch in my mother's lap, her phone began buzzing, and did not stop. Ruth appeared at the end of the aisle and bent to her ear. "Mom, I need you inside. Both families are being gathered." My mother rose, smiling for the crowd, and in the office, face up on the desk where everyone could see it, sat the folder. Priya looked at it, then at her future mother-in-law. "Mum," Mason said, "whose name is actually on this venue?" I wasn't in that room. I was 2 miles down the road in a rental car, deciding whether a cargo flight could stand in for a family, but my brother was in there, in a rented tux, asking one question and refusing to let it go. If anyone has ever fought for you like that, you remember it for the rest of your life. My phone rang while I sat on that shoulder. A local number I half recognized. The venue's exchange, from a billing confirmation months earlier. I almost let it go to voicemail. I answered out of pure habit, business voice, the one I use with dispatch. "This is Caleb." "Cal, don't hang up." Mason's voice, raw, string music looping somewhere behind him. "Everyone's waiting and I just found out whose name is on this whole wedding." Is it true? No preamble, no cushion. I reached for the old reflex. "It doesn't matter today. Go get married. We'll talk after." And got about 4 words into it before he cut me off. "Stop protecting everyone," he said. "That's how she's always won. Every time you go quiet to keep the peace belongs to her. Is it true?" "Yes," I said. The truest word I owned, and the first time in 11 years I'd said it out loud to the one person it actually belonged to. I heard my brother start to cry on a borrowed office phone in his tux. Then he pulled in a breath and said, "Then come back. I need you to do something for me." I want to be honest about the next 10 minutes, because they were the hardest of this whole story, harder than the gate. Nobody was watching me. That's the thing about real choices. They happen alone, on the shoulder of a road, with the engine ticking. Staying gone would have felt clean, dignified. Everyone finally sorry, eventually, on their own time. I wanted that the way you want a slammed door. But 2 things sat in that car with me. My brother's voice cracking open on the phone, and a compass sitting on a gift table, with a card that said he'd have wanted to see the blueprints for this one. I'd written that about a tool. I read it now like a diagnosis. Silence was the family disease. My father drowned in it quietly with a loan nobody knew about. My mother weaponized it for a decade. I'd called it protection and carried it in both arms. Somebody in this family was going to have to be the one who stays out loud, in daylight, where it costs something. 19 minutes later, I was back through the orchard gates. Ruth stood alone at the welcome table, and when she saw me, she didn't say a word about lists. She just turned the clipboard around. Under the line of fresh ink where my name had been struck, she'd rewritten it by hand, underlined twice. "Mr. Reyes, you're on the list," I made sure myself. Inside the office, Mason, jaw set, Priya's mother, Elena, arms crossed, my mother, grey in the face despite the dusty rose dress, and Arthur Cole, who turned around, stopped, and pressed a hand flat to his own chest, like he was checking a wound. "You're the pilot," he said, "from the charter out of Bakersfield, 4 years ago." "I was doing my job," I said. His voice went hard, turned toward the door where the guests were waiting. "These people were told you weren't family. I say we walk out there and tell every one of them exactly who paid for the ground they're sitting on. It would have been so easy. It would have felt so good for about an hour." "No," I said. "That turns love into a bill read out loud. That's her weapon. It was never mine." I looked at my mother, braced for a public accounting that wasn't coming. The truth is coming, all of it, but it goes person to person, on its feet. Today belongs to Mason and Priya. The door opened behind me. Mason stood there in his tux, holding the wrapped compass in both hands, tissue paper still clinging to it. "You gave me something of Dad's," he said. "Now I'm asking for something of yours. Walk me down, Cal. Best man's supposed to stand next to the groom. Stand next to me instead, up front, where everyone can see you." The room went quiet enough, to hear the prelude still looping outside. My mother made a small sound, half a word, and then looked at her younger son's face and understood the vote had already been taken. "You'll be in the front row, Mum," Mason said gently, which somehow made it worse and kinder at once. "That's where you'll be." For a moment, just the two of us by the office window, closer than we'd been in over a decade, my mother's voice came out with nothing in it. No wire, no sugar, just a person. "I didn't know how to be rescued by my own child," she said. "There it is," I said. "The first true thing you've told anyone in years." I told her what happens now. Every dollar, every rerouted invitation, all of it, told to Mason from her own mouth before the year's out, or I'd tell it once, plainly, and never again. No punishment in it, just no more editing. She nodded, barely. I've learned to let a nod be enough for one day. The doors to the aisle opened. 110 faces turned to see the groom's brother, the one they'd been told wasn't really family, standing beside him at the arch instead of in the crowd. Nobody read a statement. Nobody had to. Mason married Priya an hour behind schedule, under trees that love had quietly paid for the whole time, no longer invisibly. At the reception, Arthur sat beside me during dinner and set down an envelope, soft with age, addressed 4 years earlier to the pilot who stayed, returned to sender stamped twice before finally finding me. "It finally found the right address," he said, and left me alone with it. I read it later in the parking lot. I'm not going to tell you what it said. Some letters you keep for yourself. My mother left before the cake was cut, which the extended family read as a woman overwhelmed with emotion, and which I read correctly as a woman going home to sit with a bill she could no longer hand to someone else. In December, 9 days before the deadline I'd given her, a long handwritten letter arrived at Mason's house. Every dollar, every rerouted story, the loan, the tuition, the venue, all of it, in her own hand. A copy came to me 2 days later, with one line added at the bottom: "You were never invisible. I just couldn't survive anyone seeing you." It isn't quite an apology. It's more like an X-ray. I know exactly how much it costs some people to hold still long enough to be seen through. I haven't been back to my mother's house yet, but when she calls now, on ordinary evenings, about ordinary things, I answer. Some bridges you rebuild, one honest sentence at a time. Last month, Mason mailed me a photo from the wedding. Not the aisle, not the vows. The gift table, early that morning, before any of it happened. A small wrapped box, sitting patient as a heartbeat. On the back, in Priya's handwriting, it was always on the list. It's on my desk now, next to my flight badge. Because here's what I want you to carry out of this. Silence can feel exactly like love while you're living inside it. But love kept silent gets rewritten as absence by whoever's holding the pen. Say the true thing plainly, without a weapon in it, while the people you love can still hear you say it. If this story reminded you of a sacrifice nobody ever named, yours or someone else's, tell me in the comments. And if you believe the quiet ones deserve to be seen, subscribe and share it with the one in your family who'll know exactly why.